wanted to thank you all for joining us for this year's award ceremony for Maryland Federation of Arts Spring Member Show. My name is Ann Cole, and I am the Executive Director of MFA. I want to first start this award ceremony by thanking our members who took the time to create and submit their work for consideration for our Spring Member Show. As always, you all, our members, are the life of our organization, and you sustain us through the years. So just a big-hearted thank you to all of you, and I hope to see many of you on May 27th at Circle Gallery from 4 to 6 to celebrate your work as part of the closing reception for the Spring Member Show. With that, I want to go ahead and introduce David Carter, who is our juror this year. David has been a professor of art at Montgomery College for over 3 decades, if I counted up those years correctly, where he served as department chair from 2008 to 2014. He typically teaches courses in drawing, design, color theory, painting, and art history, and also teaches a number of classes at the Art League School in Alexandria, or of Alexandria, sorry. His work primarily is oil painting and drawing, and has been exhibited in solo and group shows on the East Coast and across the country. David received his BFA from James Madison University and his MFA from American University. And if you would like to see his work, and I think you should go and check it out, you can see it at dbcarterart.com. And so with that, David, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
This is my statement, which I'll leave for you guys to read at your convenience. But I was thrilled to have this opportunity and enjoyed looking. I always enjoy looking through images and works of art, and not necessarily always trying to make evaluations and choices, because sometimes that can be grueling. But I'm always curious. And as you'll see in this statement, if you decide to read it, that I like to keep as open a mind as possible, and to look for things that affect me, that jump out at me, that catch my curiosity. And that's, of course, always in the context of having spent decades of looking at Lord knows how many hundreds of thousands of images. And so I find it interesting to see some of the tried and true compositional techniques and some things that are new and daring, but I try to keep my response and my basic response in this case, in making these selections, was to look for things that, well, as it was mentioned to me in my instructions, look for stickiness. Stickiness, in other words, something that just kind of sticks to you, and it's coming up with an explanation as to why. That usually comes after you notice it's sticky, and can be sometimes difficult to put into words, but I'm going to do the best I can here today.
The first image, and actually, David, I'm going to go ahead and announce this one. For all of our member shows, we offer a Conley Award, which is sponsored by a couple, Rob and Susie Conley, who really wanted to encourage 3D art in our member shows. And so this Conley Award is specific for 3D art and is actually chosen by the Conleys. And so for the Spring Member Show, they have chosen Phil Taylor's Maeve, which is the ceramic vase that you see in the image.
There was, I was kind of struck when I was first going through the images for this show. A lot of the three-dimensional pieces. Now, there weren't that many that are strictly speaking three-dimensional, but there were a good number of wall pieces that were pretty much three-dimensional. They were assemblages and collages and things like that. So they struck me. Now, this, I just enjoy this. I think one of the things that comes to mind is there's the basic three-dimensional form, which is kind of a Hershey's Kiss symmetrical shape. Of course, obviously, and to see it in person is always better, but the rhythmical contours on the surface. So there's surface pattern, which is very traditional in ceramics, but not always is the surface pattern actually three-dimensional. So this is kind of like a relief element. And I just found it fascinating the way the surface textures and the rhythmical curves were very coherent with the overall three-dimensional shape. I saw this and I tried to peer inside it a little bit and try to discern how it was put together, and I'm not sure that I could figure that out. But it seems to me a piece that really embodies well the a consilience between surface, rhythm, and volume, all at the same time. And from what I could see, there's not a repeating pattern in the swirls, but they certainly do rhyme visually with the form. So very nice. My congratulations to Phil. As I lay awake. Yes, so this there was more than one painting similar to this submitted, and I chose this one. They all appeal to me, I have to say. This painting and the paintings that were similar to it, they obviously have a liveliness and they have a richness of color and activity. They have what I remember from my school days is the all over concept of composition. In other words, there's not a real prominent focal point. There's not any particular part of the canvas that seems to be the visual conclusion. Any part of this canvas is as compelling and as interesting as any other part. And so there's an evenness to it, and yet I thought that the alternation of color and the variety of shape, the shapes to me are very specific. Not that I recognize them to be any form or familiar shape, but they have a specificity and a quirkiness to them. I think if you ask the average person to simply, just make some invented color shapes on the canvas, they're going to be not nearly as interesting as these. And so these have a kind of unexpected quality that caught my attention. It reminds me a little bit of some of the late paintings by de Kooning. Actually, I think I prefer this over his work. And I have to say also that in seeing this painting, its visual impact was quite enough, but the title just felt, well, that makes perfect sense. I have a hard time getting to sleep at night. Now, I'm not sure what the exact intentions of the artist were, but my guess is that this is kind of what it feels like when your mind is racing and you're trying to get to sleep, and good luck with that. So as a visual metaphor for that uncomfortable experience, uncomfortable when you're in bed, not so much when you're looking at it on canvas. So I just found it exciting. It's a powerful painting. And we'll go to the next. Oh, okay. The Taj Mahal. This was another image that it found a home in me right away. And I was a little surprised that it did. Obviously, it's a worldly famous, iconic structure. I don't know that I've often seen it photographed through this pointed arch as a frame. It's a very popular subject matter, especially for photographers, which I think, generally speaking, that makes it a challenge to photograph something that's this iconic and try to show it in a way that has some freshness to it. But I think it was at first glance, it was the impactful symmetry of it, the relationship of the symmetrical reflection of the Taj Mahal in the vertical direction, fitting so perfectly into that keyhole shape of the pointed arch and its reflection vertically. And then, of course, there's a horizontal symmetry as well. The light, pale tones in the distance versus the dark, cavernous space that we feel ourselves to be looking out of. I thought that was a very interesting contrast. And then I noticed it's clearly not completely symmetrical. And it's just wonderful the way the two silhouetted figures just to the right that are coming, looks like they're coming up the stairs or up the hill. They're larger, a little closer and larger. They throw off the little window view. In other words, they create an asymmetrical element to it, as do their counterparts, which are the two outlined figures just barely receiving a light that are standing inside the structure and are in the dark. I was tickled by that. I just thought that it was creates a wonderful tension between the symmetry and the asymmetry. Almost like, I don't know, it's like putting salt on a cantaloupe or something. It's not something you would think to do, but it's sort of like a contrary little spice that really takes the whole experience to a new level. It's a picture that I think I could be comfortable looking at for an extended period of time, which is a considerable achievement. Oh, the thread. Okay. So this is one of the considerable number of pieces that I was talking about that I guess they fit in the two-dimensional category in that they hang on a wall, but they're really three-dimensional. They're collage. They have a relief. They have a certain depth to them. I thought that these pieces were, on the whole, quite strong and fascinating, which is why you'll find, if you see the entire show, you'll find that there's a good number of them included. Picking this one as an award winner was not easy. None of the choices were. And of course, a piece like this is not something that immediately makes sense. Even after some considerable thought, it does not necessarily make sense. But that's not so much what's important to me. If it engages me, if I feel I don't understand it, but I wish that I did, and I feel invited and I feel encouraged and I feel tempted to ponder over it and think about it and explore. There's so many things that are related to each other. Now, the one thing that, to make a little pun here, that literally ties it all together is the string. It is anchored at the bottom right, and then it seems to run through pulleys and loops and around hooks and wind its way through the composition. So it's kind of like those an exhibit you might experience at a World's Fair where you follow a velvet rope and you have a tactile guide that pulls you through because most of the space is dark. But that string just winds its way around. It hits certain high points at each pivot point. There's an image, there's a texture, there's a symbol, there's a three-dimensional form, which all have a kind of sort of ghost-like suggestion behind them. Again, this is a lot like a dream to me. And if I were pressed, I think I could probably come up with some kind of coherent story that ties the imagery together. Probably, not what the artist was thinking. But again, the making of this type of art is something that proceeds on not at a logical level. It has obviously a very surrealistic dimension to it. It's nicely done.
And David, let me just cut in here real quick because this slide is incorrect, and it's Angela Petruncio's piece, The Thread.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make that clear, and we'll correct the slide.
All right. Well, it doesn't change anything that I just said. And quite frankly, with one particular exception, the names that I'm seeing here today, I don't recognize at all. I did not pay attention to names when I chose the works, and when I came into jury to pick the winners, the names were covered up, so I didn't have access to them at that point. Are you the artist?
Yes.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for choosing this piece.
And you had at least two others, right?
Let's see. I have one other in the show. Yeah, I have one other.
The little house on wheels.
Yeah.
Yes.
Visionary vehicle.
Yes, right. Yes.
I appreciate what you said, kind of giving legitimacy to the way I work.
Okay.
I like to work in dreamlike spheres, and I
Sure.
don't exactly try very hard to portray a particular meaning. I love hearing people talk about the pieces and extracting their own views from them. And I
Mhm.
work very hard to not be obvious. I try hard to
Yes.
not be obvious, but I really enjoyed what you saw in this piece. I really did.
Well, it dawned on me at some point that one of the fascinating parts of the art experience is that there's always something that you don't quite understand, but you feel drawn toward it. Not everything does that. Some people, they may say, well, this is just sort of random combination of things. But any random combination of things does not necessarily have a voice to it. It does, there are many random things that I quite happily walk past. But this one, there's a certain hint, a limited accessibility. I feel teased, kind of. I guess maybe that's what you're going for. So, but
Yeah,
yes,
I don't mean it to not be accessible, but I do like it if people can get things out of it from their own minds and not be forced into a thought.
right. And I think that's a lot of times that's what art is about, is to be on that precarious borderline between clear concept and compelling intuition, which I imagine is a tightrope that you love to walk, right?
I love it. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, I know this painting. It's not showing up. There we go. This is another one that jumped into my heart at first glimpse. Sometimes when I see a show, some things just come to my attention. I say, oh, I'm kind of excited about that. But let me slow down. Let me go through the show more deliberately. I will get to it and give it its due attention. But there's a part of me that's always eager. And then this happened with this painting. I can't say that I identified it right away, but it had this may sound a little bit extreme or strange, but it had a Rembrandt quality to it. Dramatic contrast of light form against a dark background. The warm brown earth tones dominating. In the first few moments of looking at it, I did pretty well understand what it was I was looking at, even though I can't say that I'm very familiar with oysters. I think it was largely at an abstract level that I found this to be a very rewarding image. And well, if you think back to what I was talking about with the Taj Mahal, there was I talked about the tension between the vertical symmetry and this horizontal symmetry, and the symmetry and the asymmetrical aspects of it. And in this painting, there's a similar tension between the irregular and jagged type of line, and then the smooth, fluid, curvilinear lines, both of which occur in the oyster. The what I take to be seaweed or something in the background, has that very soft, fluid, pillowy-like collection of shapes. Which are answered again in the interior, that kind of gooey, slimy inside part of the oyster, but that contrasts with the very jagged and even the flattened and more angular aspects of the shell as it comes to its edge. I like the fact that it's an oyster. I think it's the color and the elements, the line and the shape and the color elements that seem to do it for me. I guess, to make a comparison to something more well-known would be maybe Georgia O'Keeffe. It has that feel to it, has that very tight examination of organic forms and at a larger than life scale, and the abstract patterns that it often presents. Okay. Here we go. Exploration of solid geometry in the categories of art styles. I think this would figure as a minimalist type of piece. The very geometric, flat, equilateral triangles. I was fascinated by the fact, and especially this became even more evident when I saw it in fact, in the real thing, as opposed to just the images. It's like a variation on a tetrahedron. So you've got but basic three-sided pyramid of equilateral triangles, and then you sort of replicate it and turn it on the axis of one pivot point, and you get the other. So there's a suggestion, but actually a much larger form, but two tetrahedrons. Anyway, the basic thing is, I guess, the fact that it's every facet, every plane, every shape, at least as far as I could tell, is the same shape. It's that equilateral triangle. And to see how that is explored in 3 dimensions, not only as a solid planar surface, but also as an opening, a negative space that has that shape. Very often minimalist artwork doesn't have a lot to attract people to it, unless you can be fascinated by simplicity and very simple but interesting relationships, and I enjoyed this.
And so now we're moving on to the Jurors' Choice Awards. Phil Taylor's Maeve also won a Jurors' Choice Award in addition to the Conley Award.
There's a certain appeal to as I called it, the Hershey Kiss shape to it, but in particular the rhythm of the surface textures and the surface forms resonating with the 3-dimensional quality. So there's this kind of coherence between what's almost becoming a 2-dimensional pattern on its surface, but fully engages and becomes part of the 3-dimensional quality of it. And I encourage you guys to look at this piece in the gallery. It is there's nothing repetitive about it. It looks like it may be a pattern that cycles 2 or 3 times around, but as far as I could tell, it does not. But very, very satisfying. To see it from any given point of view is as satisfying as the next. Okay, Wilderness 40 Days. Well, I mentioned the surrealist quality to the thread piece earlier. This certainly also has that same feeling. It has a dark, dream-like, almost recognition of forms. Toward the bottom, I see linear shapes that are rhythmically united, but they seem to be on the verge of becoming bones. And then that same rhythm just kind of seamlessly transitions as one moves up to the top part of the image, and it becomes a different type of curve, a different type of rounded forms, a little bit more bubbly, a little bit obviously more colorful. So, and again, I found it very inventive, and with a spectrum of shape and texture, a spectrum of color, and the two are wedded and transitioned into each other quite fluidly, which makes it sound like, well, there's a lot to be pleased about. But overall, I think, I would not call this a bright, buoyant. This does have something dark and frightening about it. At the very least, that comes from the tonality, comes from the bone-like reminiscence that I get from the shapes. Everything about it feels organic, but it feels like it is a daunting painting. That comes across. And when I saw the title, Wilderness 40 Days, rightly or wrongly, I associated this with the story of Christ's temptation in the desert. And that just seemed to make perfect sense to me, that this as much as that one other painting we looked at seemed to be a visual metaphor for the liveliness and the energy of a mind that can't go to sleep, this seemed in a similar way to be a visual presentation of the type of the darkness, the temptation, the decision, the anxiety that I think is we can quite easily read into that story. Now, I'm assuming that the title does invite that comparison. Maybe I'm off on that, but it's certainly a comparison that seems to me to be valid. Although I think the painting is powerful for those same reasons, even without that association. I think it's also important that the composition is vertical, because there seems a vertical composition like this is somewhere in the back of my mind. There's always this association with the relationship and the tension between the earth and the sky. And that has a certain religious connotation and or spiritual connotation. And I think the fact that as you go to the bottom, you get the darker shades. As you go toward the top, you get the brighter, more colorful tones. That seems to me to have a vertical quality of comparison. If this were a horizontal painting, I'm not sure that I would feel as strongly about it. So I hope that makes some sense. Mesoamerica 2. All right, so this was another one that I when the selections, the images first showed up on my screen and I scrolled through. This one caught my attention. I thought I'm looking forward to looking at this more specifically. I believe the submission probably had at least 2 views, and of course, when I saw it, in fact, I got to see it from as many points of view as I wanted. And I found this just delightful. I've been talking a lot about tensions and contrasts, and they're linking together. A lot of relief in this, and yet the relief remains fairly shallow. So it almost becomes a monolith, or it seems to be a monolith that is just starting to proliferate and to have more contrasting shapes. The shapes themselves are kind of geometric, but with a little hint of an organic variation in them. So there is that tension between all of this surface specificity and the simple volume that it seems to be flirting with being at the same time. This kind of just a rectangular column. All of this, I think, by the way, is enhanced and enriched by being painted just a single black color. And an artist that probably should have come to my mind long before this, but is just now coming to my thoughts, is Louise Nevelson. Maybe some of you are familiar with her work, but this was a very typical strategy of hers to work with a more relief kind of panels of wood forms, usually painted all black, which has a uniting effect. Mesoamerica, the title here feels appropriate at an intuitive level, and I think I would account for that as saying that it has there's a totemic quality. It has this like a totem pole or one of these giant Easter Island head kind of figures. It is reminiscent of that. It really caught me and engaged me just on the subtle suggestions that it shapes and the rhythm of its shapes. And I'm gonna say, Gordon, I know you're here, right?
Yes.
Yes, and I had not noticed your name until today.
Yeah.
But Gordon was in his class that I taught a few years back at Montgomery College, a color theory course, right?
Yes, a very good class.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. Your expertise in color is not exhibited quite so much here, but certainly your sculptural sense is. So very nice.
Well,
And-
thank you.
And do you have any other Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, it was inspired sort of old memories that had been folded down decades from a museum in Mexico City, and then seeing the actual jungle that, you know, in Costa Rica that some of these things might have existed in.
Right.
And then it was inspired by getting a real nice chunk of 4x4 fur, untreated, the kind you might use for making a mailbox post or something or other,
Right.
and having a brand new narrow blade on a bandsaw that was all tuned up, and then so it's half artistic and half technical fooling around. That's what you have here. And
Well,
I did it down at the Cape Fritz Center in the practicum that they have for more advanced students, and
right.
some of them were saying, well, you're doing a Nevelson. So you were quite right there too.
Well, you know, she wasn't so much, her pieces were not experienced in the round like this. They were more flat pieces, but
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. And nice to see you again.
Yeah, well, thank you for your comments.
Oh, okay. The egg came first. Now, Georgie, I think you're here. I think I saw your name
Yes, I am.
in the, oh, okay. Kudos to you. This, I was delighted to see this. It gets many points for its technical proficiency. And boy, I hope that doesn't have a bad tint to it, because sometimes people might think that, but this is so well done. This is just so the understanding of the materials, the feel for the charcoal, the impeccable drawing skills, the handling of light and shadow, the understanding of human forms, the face and the hands. Surely the two most difficult forms to render in the history of art, and you've handled them like an angel here. So it's beautifully done, but I would hasten to add that there's a playfulness in the kind of confrontational or the presentational attitude in the image. There's a liveliness in the expression. There's a spontaneity in the pose, all of which takes it above and beyond just a simple exercise in technique. This and quite frankly, I find that there is a superb technique. I think there's an aesthetic value to that. There is a beauty to what we might call good technique that is irreplaceable.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I think you nailed the points that I was trying to make. I mean, like emphasis on the aesthetics and just making the image as three-dimensional as possible, considering
Yes.
that that's a flat paper.
Yes.
So,
It is it's a challenge that in my mind is timeless. It's something that I'm fascinated with in my own work, and quite frankly, I am inspired and encouraged by this. So
thank you.
very well done. How any estimation on how long you spent working on it?
This took me about I would say 2.5 weeks, maybe 3 weeks.
That would make sense, and I assume that's with pretty regular attention on a daily basis.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. I'd love to see more of your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, this was one that I was looking forward to focusing on. I saw it in the batch, and it appealed to me, and boy, this might be harder to account for. I'm gonna compare this to Gordon's sculpture, which was a variation on a theme, so to speak. The theme being shallow, three-dimensional form. The theme in this case, I would say, is also shape. Now, the shapes have soft edges, the majority of them. But they still come across to me as discernible shapes, and very interesting shapes. They're not simple, they're not stereotypical. They all have that unique specificity that I tried to mention before. Of course, it's enhanced by the contrast of the warm and cool colors and the high and low intensity tones. Painters, I think it's universal. Painters just love to see patches of color on a surface, whether those patches make a face or a landscape or something like this, in which I'm not finding anything recognizable. I'm taking it to be non-representational.
I actually see her on the chat. I don't know. I know she was having problems
Can you
with
hear me
Zoom.
now?
Yes, we can.
Great, okay.
Oh, hello,
Hi.
Eleanor.
Hello.
Nice to see you there.
Yeah, it was inspired by a visit to the Textile Museum in DC, where they were showing ICAT textiles. And if that's how you pronounce it, I'm not sure. But it just thrilled me to see these hangings. They were beautiful, you can imagine. So I went home and I just was inspired by the color and the history of them and how they were used and what they meant to the people in the Asian and Indian countries that they were made in. So that was how it started, this painting. So it was.
Is ICAT, is that term used also for patterns?
Yes, it's
Styles?
patterns. They're sort of, they make material out of it, various yarns of different colors, and they're usually spiky.
Okay.
A spiky pattern that goes along. When I started this painting, I started it with that in mind, and it was awful. So I sort of changed it a lot over the year. And so it ended up this way. And that's why memories are really an important part of the title, because it doesn't look like an ICAT
I see.
textile now, nor should it really. It doesn't matter. It's just the way it's just what I called it. I have a hard time naming paintings sometimes. I never know what to call them.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Well, this just struck a chord to me, with me at as I said, the softness, some of the shapes being more definitively defined, but it's also, I was really tickled by the fact that these soft, kind of welded shapes, offset by the little linear accents, that was like a little thrill to me. That was like a little flute or trumpet solo in the midst of a lower sounding symphony. And then the composition feels so solid. The way you've distributed the contrasts and the implications of the shapes and the just the visual traffic through it. Now that there's this one dark, it looks like a slanted box of black overlapping another white. It's just a little up and left of center.
Yeah.
That to me is kind of the fulcrum of the painting visually. And but it's subtle and it's gentle. It gives me a sense of home in the composition, but it does not dominate itself over the others. So, as I look around, I find plenty of other points that are, again, like I think I was saying on the piece about As I Lay Awake, this could be cropped in so many different ways and yield an interesting composition. No, not that I'm saying I wish it was broken apart, but I think that's a strength it's a sign of strength that it has that kind of very deep coherence among the elements.
Well, thank you very much for your
You are-
comments. It means
You
a
are
lot.
very welcome. And yeah, so I didn't make the connection. The term ICAT is vaguely familiar with me, but I didn't really understand it until just now. I'd be happy to talk about some that weren't award winners or weren't in the show. If anybody has a question, if I can recall.
Hi, David. Emil Petroncio. I'm in this show. I don't necessarily need to talk about my works in the show, but I'm grateful that you selected two of my works. It's a great show, and as a member of the exhibition committee, I want to thank Sharon Arsenal, who's with us today, and David Diaz for again arranging and placing these works so beautifully. So I encourage folks who are not too far away to stop by the gallery and see the show, and hopefully join us for the reception on May 27th, 5 to 7 p.m. I think, Anne, for the reception.
4 to 6.
4 to 6, thanks. But also, David, thanks so much for your insightful comments. It's a reminder that like every one of these works is a little universe of experiences and interpretations. So
Well put, yes, sir.
so I want to congratulate everybody that's in this show. But I saw that Amanda was unmuting to talk about As I Lie Awake, but not quite in time before we moved on to the next image. So Amanda, if you want to say something about your work, I actually hung that one and it really pops off the wall in the gallery. It looks great.
Well, thank you. I was just going to say that your description, David, your description was pretty spot on about my mindset and what I was kind of like thinking. So I really wasn't going to add anything. I was going to be like, yeah, that's actually that's pretty spot on.
Yeah, well, and I'll add, I see pieces like these that just delight me, and yours does, and I often feel tempted. I said, my paintings don't generally look anything like yours, but when I look at yours, I think to myself, I want to paint like her now. So
Thank you.
that's and the same goes for pretty much everyone in the show. Well, when something is good, it is inspiring and it is motivating, and it sort of prompts a certain imitation, I guess is the word.
Well, David, I wanted to thank you again, and just kind of reiterate what Emil said. I think when you come into the gallery and you see this show in person, all of it together is just really thought-provoking and beautiful. So thank you so much. And again, thank you to all of the artists who submitted work and were chosen for the show. I think as David, you and I had mentioned kind of early on in our conversation, frankly, just being chosen for the show is kind of a huge honor in itself, given the numbers.
Absolutely. And that's something that given this moment, I'd like to make that point again, because close to 400 submissions, I think. And I went through and I picked the things that I wanted to have in the show. And I was way, way over the 65 limit requirement. So, but being a juror is not always fun. And there was, a lot of pieces in the show that I would love to talk about. I would have loved to be given more recognition to. And frankly, a lot of pieces that weren't in the show, that I just wish the gallery were bigger. More space for everyone.
Absolutely. So thank you all. And I hope to see everybody on May 27th from 4 to 6 for our closing reception. But enjoy your Sundays.
What day is that?
It's that is a Saturday.
Saturday. And am I invited to that?
Yes, you are absolutely invited to that.
I think I'd like to try to be there. Okay.
We would love to see you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.